For over 50 years, the Soviet submarine K-129 lay hidden beneath the Pacific, a ghost of the Cold War swallowed by darkness. But now, artificial intelligence has done what humans never could. It has uncovered the truth, and what the machines found deep beneath the waves isn't just tragic. It's terrifying, because this wasn't an accident at all. It was something far more deliberate: the vanishing of K-129. In March 1968, the cold waters of the North Pacific swallowed a Soviet submarine named K-129. It was a quiet disappearance that sent waves of fear through both Moscow and Washington. For years, it remained one of the ocean's deepest secrets. K-129 was no ordinary submarine. It was part of the Soviet Union's most powerful fleet during the Cold War, a time when both the United States and the USSR were locked in a silent competition of strength, fear, and technology. The submarine was a Gulf second-class ballistic missile carrier, nearly 100 meters long, built to launch nuclear weapons if war ever broke out. It carried 3 nuclear-armed R-21 missiles and several torpedoes. Beneath its metal hull were more than 90 sailors, all trained to live and fight in total secrecy. The submarine left its base in Petropavlovsk on the Kamchatka Peninsula, heading toward its secret patrol zone somewhere in the vast Pacific. Its orders were top secret. Some reports suggest it was supposed to patrol close to the American coastline, while others believe it was conducting a training mission. The truth has never been fully confirmed. For days, everything seemed normal. Then suddenly, on March 8th, communication stopped. K-129 failed to send its regular position report to the Naval Command. At first, the officers on land thought it might be a technical issue, but hours passed, then days, and no signal came through. That silence grew heavier with each hour. Inside the Soviet command centers, fear grew. Losing a nuclear-armed submarine meant more than losing a crew. It meant losing a piece of power. It meant that somewhere beneath the ocean lay deadly weapons that could trigger global panic if found by the wrong hands. Commanders whispered about every possible cause. Some said there had been an explosion inside. Others thought it had collided with an American submarine, but no one could prove anything. Weeks passed, and the search was finally called off. K-129 was officially declared lost with all hands. Families received cold telegrams that offered no explanation. In Moscow, leaders mourned quietly but continued their work. Yet deep inside, the mystery haunted them. What could cause such a powerful machine to vanish without a trace? Soon, the Soviet Navy launched one of the largest search operations in its history. Warships and aircraft covered thousands of miles, scouring the Pacific for any trace of the missing vessel. The weather was harsh, the waves unforgiving, and the ocean seemed determined to hide its secret. The Soviets had lost their submarine, but the Americans had found its echo. What the ocean whispered to them would soon set off one of the most secret missions in history. How the U.S. located K-129. On March 8, 1968, the same day the Soviet submarine K-129 vanished, analysts inside a U.S. Navy station in the Pacific noticed something unusual. On their monitoring screens, a violent spike appeared in the data. The recording captured a sudden, deep, booming sound followed by a long rumble that faded into silence. It was not an earthquake. It was not a volcano. It was something man-made. Over the next few days, acoustic experts compared readings from different listening posts across the Pacific. By measuring how long it took the sound to reach each sensor, they were able to pinpoint where it came from. Their calculations led them to a lonely patch of ocean about 1,560 miles northwest of Hawaii, the same region where the Soviets were secretly searching. The sound was unlike anything they had heard before. It resembled an explosion, or perhaps the implosion of a metal structure collapsing under pressure. Those who examined the recording believed it came from deep below the surface, nearly 5 kilometers down. The event lasted only a few seconds, but it had enough power to echo across the Pacific floor. Inside the Pentagon, the discovery was treated with silence and caution. Only a few top naval intelligence officers were allowed to review the findings. The Cold War was at its peak, and every bit of information about Soviet movements was guarded closely. If this explosion was connected to a Soviet nuclear submarine, it could change the entire balance of power in the oceans. As American analysts studied the data, the pieces began to fit together. The sound matched the time when K-129 stopped sending signals. The location matched the patrol area the Soviets were suspected of using. There was little doubt now. K-129 had met its end in that deep, dark stretch of ocean. The news never went public. Instead, the U.S. Navy kept it a closely guarded secret and began to plan something extraordinary. The Americans realized that if they could find the wreck, they could learn everything about Soviet missile technology. But the submarine lay 3 miles below the surface in one of the most remote and hostile parts of the Pacific. In a small, hidden meeting room, the plan began to take shape. It would require billions of dollars, absolute secrecy, and a cover story so convincing that even the Soviets would never suspect what was really happening beneath the waves. The Americans now knew where K-129 rested. Their next mission was not to find it, but to steal it from the ocean's grasp. What they planned to do next would become one of the most daring and secretive operations in history: the CIA's daring gamble. The discovery of K-129's possible resting place left American intelligence with a burning question. Could they actually bring it up from the bottom of the Pacific? The submarine was more than 3 miles deep, buried under crushing pressure, darkness, and layers of secrecy. No one had ever attempted such a recovery before, but to the Central Intelligence Agency, the risk was worth it. If they succeeded, they would gain access to Soviet nuclear technology, military codes, and communication systems. The CIA began designing an operation so secret and ambitious that even many within the government had no idea it existed. They called it Project Azorian. Only a handful of people in the world knew its true purpose. The operation needed an enormous ship equipped with a crane strong enough to lift thousands of tons from the sea floor. At the time, no vessel on Earth could do that, so they decided to build one. To hide the real goal, the CIA needed a believable cover story. They turned to a man whose name could sell any idea: Howard Hughes, the billionaire inventor and businessman known for his wild projects and eccentric ideas. The public was told that Hughes was funding a deep-sea mining expedition to collect valuable minerals from the ocean floor. The story spread quickly through the media, and nobody questioned it. After all, Hughes had done stranger things before. The ship they built was named the Hughes Glomar Explorer. It was a massive floating machine more than 600 feet long, fitted with cranes, pipes, and a giant mechanical claw that could reach down into the deep ocean and grab the wreck. Hidden beneath the appearance of a mining ship, it was actually one of the most complex pieces of engineering ever created for a secret mission. By 1974, after years of planning and preparation, the Glomar Explorer sailed quietly into the Pacific under the cover of scientific research. On board were hundreds of engineers, technicians, and intelligence officers who knew they were attempting something that could fail at any moment. If the Soviets discovered the true purpose of the mission, it could lead to an international crisis or even war. The recovery began slowly. The mechanical claw was lowered through the ship's large central opening, disappearing into the endless darkness below. Every meter of descent increased the tension. The crew watched carefully as the cables carried the claw deeper and deeper, down nearly 16,100 feet. When it finally reached the ocean floor, it began to grasp the wreck of K-129. Then, just as the wreck neared the surface, the unthinkable happened. Metal screamed under the strain. The claw suddenly shuddered, and part of the submarine broke away, vanishing once again into the dark abyss below. Only a section of K-129 remained in the claw's grip. The Glomar Explorer had succeeded, but only halfway. What they managed to bring to the surface revealed horrifying secrets, and what slipped back into the deep might have been far more dangerous. The haunting recovery. The engineers and intelligence officers began inspecting the wreck. The damage was far worse than anyone had imagined. The hull was torn open, like a crushed can, its thick steel bent at impossible angles. Entire compartments had collapsed inward, showing the terrifying power of the deep sea. Control panels were melted and wires were fused together, suggesting there might have been an onboard fire before the final implosion. Among the debris were torpedoes, still locked in their tubes. They looked almost untouched, their deadly purpose frozen in time. There were also parts of the missile launch system crushed and mangled, yet still recognizable. For the CIA, this was a goldmine of intelligence. Every fragment could offer clues about Soviet nuclear weapons, targeting systems, and communication codes. But what shocked everyone most was not the machinery. It was the discovery of the men who had gone down with it. 6 bodies were found inside the wreckage, preserved by the freezing deep-sea temperatures. Their remains told a story of chaos and fear. Some were pinned beneath heavy equipment, others near the control room, where the last moments of the submarine must have unfolded. The recovery team treated the remains with solemn respect, documenting everything and later holding a secret burial ceremony at sea. American and Soviet flags were placed side by side during the service, though the world would not learn about it until decades later. As the team continued examining the wreck, something strange caught their attention. Several panels in the control area had been tampered with. Levers were bent, wires cut, and some sections showed signs of manual interference. It looked as if someone had tried to override the systems or trigger an emergency procedure. One investigator whispered that it could even suggest sabotage. Another said it might show a desperate attempt to save the sub as it spiraled out of control. But one detail was far more alarming. One of the missile tubes was empty. There should have been 3 nuclear-tipped missiles, but only 2 were present. One of the 3 R-21 nuclear missiles was gone. The hatch around it was damaged, as if it had been forced open or ejected before the submarine sank. The recovered section of K-129 was carefully stored and transported for study, but what remained at the bottom of the Pacific became a haunting mystery. Somewhere beneath 16,000 feet of dark water, the rest of the submarine still lay untouched, keeping its dead and its secrets. The missing warhead theories. In the months that followed, experts from the Navy and the CIA began to form theories. Some said it was an accident. Perhaps a fuel leak or electrical spark had triggered a fire inside the missile compartment. The R-21 missiles were known to be temperamental, and a small malfunction during patrol could easily lead to an explosion. If that happened, it would have filled the submarine with toxic gases and fire before the hull collapsed under pressure. Others believed something more frightening. They suggested that the crew of K-129 may have tried to launch a missile without official authorization. During those tense years of the Cold War, Soviet commanders carried strict nuclear orders that could never be questioned. But inside the submarine, far from Moscow's control, anything could happen. Some historians think one officer might have decided to test or even fire a missile to provoke a response from the United States, perhaps as an act of defiance or desperation. If such an unauthorized launch attempt took place, it might explain the strange burn marks found around the control panels and the cut wires in the wreckage. It could also explain why one missile was missing. The theory suggests that the weapon might have been ejected during a failed launch sequence. As the missile tried to leave the launch tube, the sudden pressure difference and heat could have destroyed part of the submarine's structure. The rest of the vessel would then have imploded in seconds. There was also a darker theory whispered in intelligence circles. Some suspected sabotage from within the Soviet Navy. At the time, political tensions in Moscow were high, and loyalty to the Communist Party was constantly tested. There were rumors of officers who secretly opposed their commanders or were sympathetic to the West. Could someone on board have tampered with the submarine systems intentionally? Some American analysts believed the signs of manual interference might point to internal betrayal rather than mechanical failure. A fourth theory came from oceanographers years later. They studied U.S. satellite data from March 1968 and found a small heat signature in the same region where K-129 vanished. It lasted less than a second, but it was far stronger than any natural event. Some believe it might have been the moment the missing warhead detonated deep underwater. Others argue it could have been the missile's propulsion system burning up during its descent. Yet there is another possibility that chills even the most skeptical minds. What if the missile never exploded at all? What if the warhead survived intact and lies somewhere at the bottom of the Pacific? The depth of the ocean in that region is more than 16,000 feet, an environment few machines can reach even today. It would be almost impossible to recover or to know who might have already done so in secret. While the world argued about what happened beneath the waves, both superpowers remained silent. But silence could not last forever. In time, that silence was broken not by men, but by machines. And what they uncovered would terrify even the experts who once kept the secret. The aftermath and the Glomar response. When the Glomar explorer returned to port, it carried more than a piece of twisted steel from the ocean floor. It carried secrets that could never be spoken aloud. Meanwhile, in Moscow, Soviet officials were deeply suspicious. They had followed the strange activities of the Glomar explorer during its supposed mining project. Some intelligence officers in the KGB believed that the Americans had found their missing submarine. Others dismissed the idea as paranoia. But the Soviet Navy could not ignore the fact that their submarine had disappeared in the same region where the Americans were suddenly conducting research. Throughout the 1970s and 1980s, quiet diplomatic pressure was applied behind closed doors. Soviet representatives asked questions in coded language, and American diplomats answered with polite silence. Neither side wanted to push too hard. Both knew that admitting the truth would create an international scandal. The CIA destroyed most of the documents that could confirm what was recovered. The few that survived were sealed away in secure vaults. In 1975, a major U.S. newspaper began investigating rumors of a top-secret recovery operation. When reporters contacted the CIA for comment, they received the now legendary reply, "We can neither confirm nor deny the existence of such an operation." That single line not only protected the agency, but also entered history as a phrase used in countless intelligence cases after that. It was not until 1992 that the public caught a brief glimpse of what really happened. The US government quietly released a short video showing a solemn burial ceremony at sea. American sailors stood at attention on the deck of the Glomar Explorer as they lowered 6 Soviet crew members into the ocean. Both nations' flags hung side by side. It was a rare moment of silent respect between old enemies. But even then, the video told only part of the story. What else had been recovered was never shown. For decades, the wreck of K-129 remained undisturbed on the ocean floor. The Soviets collapsed, and the Cold War ended. But the truth about what happened to that submarine stayed buried, both in the sea and in the archives of intelligence agencies. Yet time has a strange way of uncovering secrets. The ocean may hold its silence, but technology does not. In recent years, as artificial intelligence began reshaping how humans study the past, scientists discovered that even the deep can whisper to those who know how to listen. Modern systems capable of reading acoustic patterns and analyzing classified data started finding clues that human analysts had missed for decades. The truth, however, is far more terrifying than anyone ever imagined. How artificial intelligence changed undersea warfare. By the early 2020s, AI was already transforming how the world explored the sea. Naval researchers began using it to study sonar signals, ocean currents, and even the faint magnetic patterns left behind by lost vessels. Machines could now analyze millions of sound recordings faster than any human ever could. And among those recordings were the old acoustic tapes from the SOSUS network, the same secret system that had first heard the final moments of K-129. Engineers fed the archived data into advanced AI models. These programs were trained to recognize patterns of sound caused by explosions, implosions, and mechanical failures. The machines listened to every echo from the ocean floor, every faint vibration that had once gone unnoticed by human ears. What they began to detect was shocking. AI discovered tiny irregularities in the recordings from March 8, 1968. The sound of K-129's destruction was not a single blast, as once believed. It was a sequence, 3 distinct acoustic signatures. The first matched the sound of a missile hatch opening. The second, a burst of compressed air followed by metal scraping, resembled a missile ejection event. The third was the terrifying low-frequency boom of a catastrophic implosion. It meant something had gone terribly wrong between the first 2 moments. Modern algorithms then cross-referenced the data with satellite readings, weather reports, and classified naval maps that had been declassified over the years. The result painted a more complex picture than anyone had ever imagined. According to AI models, the submarine may have suffered an accidental missile ejection that triggered a fire in the launch compartment. Within seconds, the fire spread, ignited the torpedo fuel, and caused the entire vessel to collapse under immense pressure. But the analysis also revealed something else. An acoustic anomaly recorded almost 2 minutes before the first sound. It was faint but distinct, as if another submarine or unknown vessel had been nearby. Some experts now wonder if a US or even Soviet vessel might have been shadowing K-129 in secret. If that were true, it could mean that the incident was not entirely an accident. The The AI's calculations suggested that K-129 may have misinterpreted the nearby sonar as an attack. The submarine's captain could have ordered a defensive response, perhaps preparing to fire a missile as a warning or deterrent. But the launch system malfunctioned. The pressure inside the tube rose beyond safety limits, and the missile ejected prematurely. The warhead's fuel ignited, triggering a chain reaction that led to a massive fire. Seconds later, the submarine imploded under the immense pressure of the ocean. Beyond K-129, the rise of AI began changing undersea warfare altogether. Modern navies now use AI-powered drones to patrol the oceans, detect hidden submarines, and predict enemy movements. These systems can process sonar reflections, temperature gradients, and even biological noise from marine life to separate human activity from nature's silence. What once took months of human analysis now takes seconds. The same technology that solved ancient mysteries is also rewriting the rules of future conflict. With AI controlling underwater drones and acoustic surveillance systems, no submarine can truly remain hidden anymore. The ocean, once the world's greatest cover, has become transparent. But when AI turned its attention back to the past, it did something extraordinary. By combining satellite imagery, oceanographic data, and the recovered details from Project Azorian, it built a digital reconstruction of K-129's final minutes. The machine-generated model offered a conclusion that no human had ever dared to suggest before. Today, experts continue to study the digital reconstruction. Some governments quietly deny its conclusions, while others refuse to comment at all. But the data remains there, cold, precise, and undeniable. What are your thoughts on AI uncovering the dark truth behind K-129's disappearance? Do you think some secrets are better left buried? Share your thoughts in the comments below.